I am the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to Vampire Reviews. You are about to get schooled. Oh! Sorry, I'll never do that again. Tonight, we are finally talking about the 2014 film Vampire Academy. I saw it in theaters when it came out, back when I used to do vampire vlogs the morning after watching new releases. I never did the vlog. Yeah, I've been putting off talking about this one for 4 years now. It's not good. It's not a good vampire movie. But it's based on a book that I really liked, and it follows the book almost to the letter, so what gives? Rochelle Mead's Vampire Academy Young Adult series premiered in 2007 and ran for 6 novels and then 6 more in a spin-off series. It was one of those series that did well on its own, but then got huge from the fortune of good timing with the vampire mania that Twilight sparked. Mead's agent suggested she write a vampire YA series, but she'd never even heard of Twilight until her novel started getting rejected by publishers for being either too much like it or not like it enough. It wasn't rejected for long, though, and the series developed a huge fan base of teenagers and adults and made the New York Times bestseller list repeatedly. Even though the conception and execution of the story were in no way whatsoever a reaction to Twilight, it's inevitable that they be compared. The first book was recommended to me back in the day by a Twilight hater as a refreshing alternative. But many Twilight fans love this series too. I'll put it this way. If you like Twilight because you like pretty teenage good vampires fighting evil vampires in violent battles with some forbidden romance tossed on, then you will like these books. If you hate Twilight because you hate angsty emo romance between a bland Lego brick human girl and emotionally abusive vampire boyfriend, then you'll like these books. Vampire Academy has some romance in it, like most stories do, especially in the later books, but it's not a romance novel. The central relationship is between 2 gal pals. And I am all for stories about strong female friendships, though less queerbaiting would be nice. But besides, the obvious major influence on this book was Harry Potter. Vampire Academy is a slang name for St. Vladimir's School of Vampires and Wizardry. Not really, but it might as well be. 2 types of kids go to this school. The Moroi are good vampires who drink blood but otherwise aren't fast or strong or immortal or any of that fun vampire stuff. But they do have magical powers. They're not sorted into houses, but elements. Earth, wind, water, fire. And for a few super special ones, spirit. Which is the power to heal wounds and diseases, even fatal ones, as well as mind control. Also, the main vampire character is a princess in their Moroi society and mixed up in all kinds of royalty intrigue. Her best friend and the film's main character is not a vampire, but a dhampir, which here is basically human, but with the strength and fighting skills the Moroi lack. So they serve as the guardians to the Moroi. So the story has beautiful teenage vampires, kick-ass fighter girls, magical powers, sorting, and princesses. What more could a girl want? With all those elements in play, no wonder they made a movie out of it in 2014. After the last Harry Potter and Twilight movies were over, studios were desperate to find the next big hit series to fill the angsty teenager void. Beautiful Creatures and Mortal Instruments had flopped. Perhaps Vampire Academy would be the one. It was not. It was not the one. But why not? The screenplay was written by Daniel Waters, famous for writing Heathers, and it was directed by his brother Mark Waters, who directed Mean Girls. If anyone could do this high school girl stuff right, surely this was the team. And the actors are all competent. And yet the film flopped. Hard. Some fans of the books love it because it really does stick super close to the novel, but most fans hate it because it's bad. It's just really bad. Just look at that tomato meter. So what went wrong? If the source material was all so good, why wasn't this the next Twilight? Well, Twilight was a simple, moody story about feelings. And it was directed by a superfan of the books who poured her heart into the film. And that resonated with audiences. As well as the Waters brothers did with teenage girls in the past, I don't believe they cared about Vampire Academy at all. I believe they were hired by a studio who thought a paint-by-numbers film would be an easy cash-in with minimal effort or emotional investment involved. But it was too transparent a ploy, and nobody was buying it. There's a whole lot of lore to the Vampire Academy universe. We have 3 different types of vampires to start with: their social structure, their reproductive necessities, their religion, their history, their school, the breakdown of the elemental magic. And instead of showing us all this in creative ways, the film just dumps it on the audience through voice-over exposition bombs that happen so fast and so often it's almost impossible to keep all the info straight if you haven't read the book. On top of all that, there's the actual plot of the movie, which is Rose, the Dampier guardian and best friend of Lissa, a Moroi princess, have a psychic bond that no other vampires have. Lissa hasn't figured out what her magical element power is yet. Oh, because it's spirit, and this is so rare that nobody's heard of it. And these things make them run away from their fancy secluded boarding school. They don't know why they ran away exactly because their memories have been wiped, but the film starts a year after this when they're caught and brought back to the school. They're the target of harassment by the other students in some typical high school drama. Meanwhile, more mysterious and dangerous stuff keeps happening. This leads to a mystery ending with Lissa getting kidnapped by someone who she thought was her friend but who wants to use her spirit powers for selfish reasons. Meanwhile, Rose is training to be a better guardian and falling for her sexy teacher. Meanwhile, Lissa is falling for the school's resident emo boy who's an outcast because his parents willingly became the 3rd kind of vampire, the evil Strigoi. And through all this, Rose and Lissa are trying to figure out what the deal is with their psychic bond and how it connects to a historical figure and what happened to the teacher who wiped their memories before they ran away. And yeah, it's a lot. And the book does it all really well, laying it out clearly and interestingly in a way to keep the reader engaged in all those layers. But the film piles everything on so fast, it has no time to breathe, no sense of flow. As one critic put it, watching it feels like you're starting on the 8th episode of a TV series while sitting next to its biggest fan who's trying to fill you in on everything you missed. Besides just the voiceover narration, the dialogue is so rapid fire that it's like it's playing on fast forward, rushing from one moment to the next without providing much reason to care about what's happening. After a quippy conversation, the scene will just cut as if we came to the end of a chapter without any effort to transition naturally to the next scene. The result is the relationships between the characters are left completely underdeveloped in the action. And instead, they just tell us how they feel, like this.
I'm crushing on my mentor, Dimitri, who's like old enough to be my... Lissa doesn't think that you're a creepy stalker. She actually likes you.
And also, all these pretty white boys look and act so much alike, I can't tell them apart, much less remember their names. In writing novels particularly, there is an element called voice. That is the feeling of the writing style. Some authors always write in the same voice, and some are skilled in writing all kinds of different voices. If a novel is written in the first person, like Vampire Academy, then the voice is the narrating character's actual personal voice. It is very popular for young adult novels to be written in what is known as a quirky voice. Twilight is not written in a quirky voice, it's written in a dreamy sort of voice. Vampire Academy is quirky. Rose, the narrator, has a sarcastic, wisecracking, dry sense of humor. She's confident, cocky even, but good-hearted, puts her friends first. And all this comes through in how she narrates. Rochelle Mead happens to be skilled at writing this kind of voice. For many other authors, it comes off as kind of phony-sounding teenager talk. The barreling freight train of exposition onslaught in the movie feels like an attempt to capture this quirky voice style for the film, and it just doesn't work. But enough about the filmmaking, we should at least talk a bit about the vampires. So, there are no humans in this movie other than the background blood donors. The Dampiers are essentially human, but they're already embroiled in the vampires' world. This isn't about vampires who keep secrets or live on the fringes of society. They are the entire society. So, in that sense, how are the Moroi even vampires at all. They don't have any of the traditional vampire strengths or weaknesses, so they might as well just be blood-drinking wizards. They're the good vampires, but like regular people, they actually range from saints to jerks, with most of the kids at the high school being entitled snobs. But we also have the Strigoi, the bad vampires, the actual, real vampires. These names all come from Romanian folklore, by the way. Moroi are born and age and die like humans, but if they kill someone by draining their blood, they become Strigoi, kind of like a Jedi choosing to cross over to the dark side. Strigoi can also make more of their kind in the traditional vampire way. They're strong and fast and immortal, burn in the sunlight, and can only be killed by a silver stake through the heart, beheading, or burning. They lack all sense of morality and become agents of chaos, killing and destroying all they can. Your basic mindless boogeyman. Pretty shallow and soulless as far as interpretations of vampires go, but the interesting part comes from how the Moroi relate to them. Because some Moroi choose to become Strigoi willingly. Some do this because they are desperate for power or immortality. Some do it to escape their emotional damage, seeking freedom in a sort of mental suicide. The Strigoi exist in the movie as this looming, unseen threat. They did add in a random weird attack scene at the beginning to establish their existence, but they actually don't matter much in the story at all. They're part of the world building, but don't serve as the antagonist to the plot. They're involved a lot more in the later books, but not the one this film's based on. The actual antagonist is Victor, a Moroi royal who's Lissa's honorary uncle who wants to abuse her spirit powers for his own gain. Other smaller antagonists include his flunkies, which are the Dampiers who are jealous of Rose's awesome teacher for being so awesome, and the mean kids at school. Compared to all these, the Strigoi mean practically nothing to the plot. Victor persuades his own daughter to turn into one to help him escape after he kidnaps Lissa, but she's just a tool. So if the Strigoi are the only actual vampires here and they're not really part of it, is the movie even really about vampires at all? The real threat isn't scary monsters, but those who would use and abuse their own kind. The metaphorical vampires among us, leeching off of others. We see this in other Moroi characters besides Victor, especially in the high school angst. You'd think the high school social dramatics would be pretty complex, considering who wrote and directed this film, but we don't get any of the head games or emotional subtleties of Mean Girls here. The requisite school bitch, Mia, is much more like a Draco Malfoy character. Openly antagonistic. She's bitter and hateful because Lissa's brother broke her heart, but there's nothing vampire-y about her behavior. The plastics in Mean Girls are 10 times as vampiric in the way they turn Lindsay Lohan into a monster like them. There's definitely a lot you could do with this vampires meet Mean Girls concept, but the movie doesn't even try.
Back off, bitch. He's mine now.
Mia's a bit of a troubling character. One of the great things about the series is how sex positive it is, and how it deals with the stigma of the sexual allure of vampires, subverting it from a shameful thing to empowered female sexuality. There's even a speech against slut-shaming at the end of the film, and yet it still makes a big point of painting Mia in a negative light because she exchanged sex for help from two boys to antagonize Lissa and Rose.
Break the case wide open and I still only get the cheek. Ouch.
And I don't even know what it's trying to say with Senior Friendzone here. This is the last we ever see of this character, and Rose never even thinks of him again. Despite how vicious the teenagers are, we're informed that the Moroi are physically frail and trained in a pacifistic philosophy, learning not to use their magic in either offensive or defensive ways. This is why they need the Dampier Guardians to protect them. Christian, the emo Moroi prince, thinks this is a dumb idea and wants to use his fire powers to fight. And this is a shocking, novel idea to everyone! What do these people even do with their magic anyway? As contrived as it does give the Dampier Guardians reason to exist. Their philosophy is, they come first. They're second-class citizens to the Moroi. They sacrifice their lives and livelihoods to protect them. Most guardians are men, because it's apparently impossible for a female Dampier to have babies and still be a guardian. They have to choose between family and duty, and cannot let themselves love if they want to keep their vocation.
If I let myself love, I wouldn't throw myself in front of the princess. I would throw myself in front of you.
That the Moroi prefer treating these people this way as opposed to just using their powers to protect themselves shows how lazy and selfish they are. They are the good vampires, but Though they might not be draining life by drinking blood, they are doing it in other ways. They're not so good after all. An elite upper-class abusing society. And the books really get into all this class stuff, using vampires as metaphors for real-world social issues. But the film just yammers on too fast for the audience to pay attention to it. Yes, it sticks to the book, but film is a different language than a novel. It needs to be translated into a different voice. And the people who made this movie didn't care to even bother. They thought they could patent it and package it and slap it on a vampire lunchbox and people would just buy it. It ends with a sequel bait stinger, and the book's fans were desperate for it to happen, even if they hated the first movie. Maybe the second one would be better? The studio launched a crowdfunding campaign and said if they could raise $1.5 million to prove that there was interest, they would put up the rest of the budget to make the sequel. It barely reached $250,000. But you know, even if this movie had been wonderfully well made, it probably wouldn't have been successful. 2014 was kind of a bad time for vampire movies. Twilight fatigue had already hit hard, and 4 years later, we're still not over it. Did you know that we had 8 vampire movies in 2012? Oh, that was a good year. This year we've had 1. And I didn't do a vlog on that one either. With all its complicated lore, Vampire Academy might have made more sense as a TV series where they could take their time developing all the information. Vampires are still hot and happening on TV. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and I don't know when vampires will be allowed back on the big screen, but we've got plenty on television, and who even likes leaving the crypt and going outside anyway?
Fast guy, young bad girls do it well. Fast guy, young bad girls do it well. Fast guy, young bad girls do it well.
You know, I think their real magical powers are like hair and makeup magic, because I don't know how else those pretty teenage girls could all look so perfect all the time, even when they're like fighting and stuff. Do you know how long it took me to get my hair like this? Yeah, they definitely got some like vampire stuff going on with the hair. Perfect vampire hair. Thank you to the Patreon patron who requested this episode. You are awesome, and the rest of you should join my Patreon if you haven't already, because I need patrons to make this show happen, and I want to do more vampires for you. So join me. Also, like this video, leave me comments. I love comments. Subscribe. Make sure you click the alert bell so you actually get my subscription updates, because if you don't, you won't. And I want you to watch my videos. Good night.